There's technologies out there that can detect your emotions. Sentiment analysis has existed for quite a long time. Voice biometrics has existed for quite a long time. Speech recognition has existed for quite a long time. It's just that what's happened is in the last 10 years is that the accuracy level of these technologies has got to a point where they're actually ready for production.
Welcome to The Future Of, a podcast by Fresh Consulting, where we discuss and learn about the future of different industries, markets, and technology verticals. Together, we'll chat with leaders and experts in the field and discuss how we can shape the future human experience. I'm your host, Jeff Dance. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you both with me on this episode focused on the future of voice AI. Excited to have two serious voice leaders and evangelists that think about and work on the future. Let's start with some introductions. Kane, if I can start with you, would you care to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back in the saddle alongside Roger as well. It's been a little while. My name's Kane Simms. I'm a founder of a consultancy called VUX World. We help organizations plan and execute customer experience strategies with a focus on artificial intelligence, and namely conversational AI and voice AI, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. I noticed you were named a top 10 voice AI influencer by VoiceBot and a top 20 voice AI influencer by SoundHound. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
It's not been a very long time in this space, but it's changing so fast. So it's nice to have some experts in the room that have spent, their 10,000 hours, if that's what defines us as experts. But thank you for being here with us. Roger, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, well, first, Kane, nice to see you again. I'm with a legended voice in the room, so Kane Simms. But I've been working with voice and conversational AI since 2018. I work for Samsung and as a developer evangelist. So what I do is talk to companies, designers, developers, and talk about conversational AI and how we can use conversational AI to drive really their business goals forward, or if it's not a business, they're creating a game or having something fun or something useful, and really exploring how voice can be where it is the best user interface and oftentimes where it is not a good user interface, and kind of building the appropriate tooling and capabilities for the job.
Nice. Thanks for being with us, Roger. I noticed that you are also the ambassador of the Open Voice Network, working on a voice registry system, kind of like a DNS for voice applications. Also the CEO, Chief Voice of VoiceCraft, a voice app. Can you tell us a little bit more about those two things as well?
Yeah, so Open Voice Network is an industry consortium, voluntary people from all walks in the industry really getting together and talk about standards, right? So if you look at the platforms, it's pretty fractured right now. And so the whole idea there is, wow, we would all benefit if we talked about some standardization. So it's a working group. I've been focusing on that registry system part of it, but there's a lot of things around privacy, around interoperability, et cetera. So it's an exciting place to be. And, so we call ourselves all on it ambassadors for it. I kind of like that term. And then, I have a small, it's a little on ice right now, but I built several voice applications for the different voice assistants through VoiceCraft, my company. Primarily things that are fun and games, something to, end of the day, kick up your legs, go talk to your voice assistant and have some fun.
No, that's great. It's great to hear that you've had experience at the developer level as a leader, in one of the world's biggest companies, but also at the standard level. I think that multitude experience is really helpful, pertinent.
Someone's really passionate about it when they finish work and they start building voice apps in their spare time.
Exactly. Nice.
There you go.
And Kane, for VUX, do you guys actually offer services? Does your organization offer services? Tell me a little bit more about what you guys do.
Yeah. So it's a strategic consultancy, and we help organize it. One of the biggest challenges that companies face is trying to figure out and demystify this whole landscape. If we're going to automate some of our customer experience, how exactly do we go about doing that? How do we select the right technology? How do we kind of put together the right kind of teams? What do we do as far as where do we start with use cases? How do we design a good conversation? How do we implement that? What's the best practice for improving it over time? There's a whole range of things that businesses struggle with, and that's what we're there to do, is to help them do that. And so we can do things like roadmap planning, use case assessments and validation, conversation design training, a whole bunch of stuff around what it takes to, one, plan properly, how to put together a right strategy, and then two, how to go about executing that as well. And so we've been doing it for around about 4.5 years in total, and it's still one of those areas where there's just big gaps in knowledge and experience at the enterprise level, and so companies like ours are there to try and help fill those gaps where we can.
Awesome. I love that you have that deep expertise, and they're actually not only putting on events and leading conversations, but when you're actually there in the trenches, then it makes a big difference when you actually do the work.
Definitely, yeah. And we didn't really mention, what I haven't mentioned is the media side, which is what most people know us for, which is the podcast, the newsletters, the articles that we write. And, it's every single day we publish something somewhere to try and help educate and help guide people in the right direction as far as how do you do this? Why should you do this? What are the challenges? How do you overcome them? Who should you speak to about certain very specific challenges and those kind of things? And so, yeah, it's almost like we're running two companies at the minute, which is mad.
Complicated, but awesome. It would be good to kind of give the listeners a little bit more insight into the marketplace, sort of the industry, and how things have evolved in the last few years, given how much has changed. Can you guys give us kind of your overview, essentially, of where we are today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, conversational AI and voice, and it just keeps on improving at this really dramatic rate. What I think has happened a lot in the last couple of years is there's been a little bit of shift to the industry focus from consumer to B2B side. I think this was kind of inevitable. There's still strong, consumer, and we all know about voices, as you mentioned, your kids, and the first words out of their mouth were Alexa, right? And those are going along and doing pretty well. But I think what you're really seeing, and this is pretty exciting, is on the B2B side, is businesses and companies realizing, hey, you know what? If I put a conversational AI, a voice interface in front of this is going to be better for my workers or my customers, et cetera. And so what I really see is innovation on that side. You call up the call center now and you're like, oh no, I'm in the dreaded IVR, and all of a sudden it works really well. Well, what is that? That's really conversational AI coming into place instead of those strict rule bound kind of old school IVRs. Now it's actually understanding what you want to do quickly, and you're not, mashing the 0 key to get a person, because it actually works. And so to my mind, the biggest trend I'm seeing is definitely innovation in the B2B space. And I think that's good. There's a saying in Silicon Valley is B2C is where it's sexy, and B2B is where the money is. And, it's good to be focusing on the B2B side, because I think it'll be a lot of innovation. And as people get used to interacting with companies via voice, they'll also be more comfortable interacting at home with their voice assistant. And it's it's a virtuous cycle.
What you're saying there, Roger, I mean, if you look back at 2018, 2019, there was stats around which was saying that 33% of UK households had a smart speaker, 37% of US households had a smart speaker, and this is a few years ago, kind of like going into the pandemic. And as Roger kind of alluded to there, what these things have done is they've gotten people used to and comfortable talking to stuff. And so when you do call your bank, and all of a sudden it's a AI assistant that answers the phone, there's a bit more tolerance there. And so round about the same time as when people were buying smart speakers, and the adoption of smart speakers at one point was faster than the smartphone, if you can believe that. What was happening at the same time is that it was around about the same time that Facebook released the APIs and ability for third-party developers to build conversational chatbots in Messenger. And so a bunch of companies started building chatbots and stuff like that around about 2016, 2017. And then as the adoption of voice assistants began, those companies started really kind of like learning how to build chatbots properly over the course of 2019 to 2022. And the mature organizations, the HSBCs, the Verizons, the Citibanks, those kind of organizations have now kind of scaled what they've done, put it across multiple different channels. And so it's text, it's voice in the IVR, it's on the website. And at the moment, it's forecast, I think it's Juniper that forecasts that in the US alone, spend on conversational AI technology by the end of next year is going to be 148 billion, I believe it is. And so it's really, really ramping up, and the progress over the last 5 years, not just on the technology side, but on the adoption and implementation of this technology has been pretty significant.
So clearly it's big, right? The world, if the majority of us have access to this now, like in our pockets, in our homes, where, Roger, you talked about this being, moving more quickly, kind of current state in the business field. Talk to us a little bit more about that, like some of the bigger industries that are embracing this and some of the movement that you see.
You may not know it now, but when you talk to an IVR, especially if it starts working well, you're talking to conversational AI system. So I think, whether that's your bank or your airline, et cetera. One thing I think is really interesting and makes a lot of sense is I think McDonald's, they bought a voice company, and you're seeing a lot of these fast food, and they're talking about their drive-thrus, right? Well, that's really a really good use case for voice, right? And it's kind of a limited set of things that can order, so it kind of fits and should work pretty well. But I'm excited about that. There's this whole concept, I'll call it the deskless worker. And this is people who don't sit at a desk. They're out in the field. They're salespeople. They're repair people. Anyone out there. Okay, so what do they have to do? They often go out in the field and they have technology they have to work with. All right, but they're busy with their hands and they can't do it. If there's a voice interface in front of that, that's a big win. Or, we've all had it. You're talking to someone, right? And they have to put their, down, look at the computer screen and do something. That's not really natural. So as we start building voice interfaces in front of this technology, you get to be maybe a little more natural. Maybe the voice, you can ask it in the middle of a conversation for some information and then continue the conversation without that look down at my, laptop, touch my keyboard, which kind of breaks the flow there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that when you were alluding to Google and why they might be interested in this stuff, if you look across businesses, 90% of data within organizations is unstructured data, as in data that can't be accessed via an API, can't be understood, logically, can't be searched, can't be analyzed. And so Google's job is to gather unstructured data in the form of text, searches and stuff like that. And so you're right, there's no wonder that they're interested in this kind of stuff. But when you think about, we talk about voice AI, but really what we're alluding to behind the scenes is natural language understanding. And that's the real key component here, because that's the thing that takes meaning from a set of words. And so on the business side, industries you asked about who's using it, I mean, insurance, financial services and banking, things like that, retail, hospitality, travel, healthcare, all industry sectors, government, where you've got a lot of customer demand, you've got a lot of pressure on the business operations, very difficult to recruit staff, very difficult to, keep people in jobs and all that kind of stuff. Increasing demand, especially, if you look at some retailers have had phenomenal sales over COVID. Some healthcare institutions have had incredible pressure put on them over COVID. So the amount of influx of customer contact has risen tremendously. And AI is one of the ways in which businesses have been trying to manage that. And there's some really good use cases at the very large side. If you look at like Deutsche Telekom or Verizon, they're using chatbots on their website to encourage customers to self-service, so they don't need to call the contact center, making better use of their website. If you look at a company like Bank of America, world renowned for its voice assistant, its mobile app, incredibly helpful. About 10 million interactions a month, I think it is, that they handle. And then you look at Verizon, and they're doing even agent assist use cases where the people in the call center, they're having a conversation with a customer, but they've got an AI assistant on the back end that's actually helping them through that conversation, suggesting what the customer's after, helping them process transactions quicker, which reduces the average handle time of the call, which saves the company money. There's a whole range of areas where this stuff's being used. And then you can look at things like emotional AI and sentiment analysis and conversational intelligence, which essentially can monitor conversations like this or monitor calls in a call center, summarize calls into extract intent. It can do all kinds of analysis, business analysis. It's absolutely incredible. Voice biometrics for authentication, that saves banks millions and millions of pounds per year just to identify who somebody is. And so the breadth of this technology is quite wide, and the application of it is inherent everywhere. You know, voice is a very good input. And so a lot of what Roger was saying there around field workers and stuff like that, the task that they're being given is a terrible task. They work with their hands out in the field, yet they have to do their work on a tablet that's this big with a set of gloves on and thumbs that they can't type with anyway. And so it's a really, really good input device. And so the applications of it, although we're seeing a lot of application, we're seeing some real business benefit from it and customer benefit from it, we're really just scratching the surface, because there's not, if you take all the companies in the world, you're probably looking at 10% of them who are really utilizing this stuff now. And that might even be a stretch.
I think it was 2015 when Amazon kind of had their Echo device kind of come out. But then, you know, every other major tech company seemed to come out with one shortly thereafter. And any thoughts on why that moved so fast? Interesting
question. One is that the go-to-market for those devices was very effective. Google were giving them away with Spotify subscriptions, and Amazon dropped the price to the point where they were actually losing money on every Echo they sold in 2017, 2018, because they were just rushing them into houses. The aim of those devices strategically from Amazon, Google, etc's perspective was get the devices into households and establish a footprint, because it's the controller of your smart home, it's the controller of your music, it's now, you know, becoming the controller of your daily tasks and those kind of things. And so really it was a case of a real big effort on behalf of both companies to get adoption and get these devices into homes. And I think that a lot of the market and a lot of the price reductions was certainly a huge factor. But at the same time, and I'm sure Roger's got a load of thoughts on this stuff as well, which is that it was the first device ever which existed solely to speak to. There's been no device ever in the history of technology that the only point of this thing is to speak to. It doesn't even look that great. The first one was just like a circular hockey puck thing, and all you could do is speak to it, 2 buttons on top. And so there was a novelty factor to it as well, which is that this is really cool and really new, and then there was an accessibility factor as well. A lot of older kind of people were using it and stuff like that. There was a really good play for kids, for games and homework and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a myriad of a whole bunch of different things, ranging from the novelty factor to the go-to-market deployment strategies from those companies. But I'm sure, Roger, you've got some kind of other thoughts as well.
I completely agree with you. I think it's instructive to look at what's the core business model of these companies. Okay, so Amazon wants to sell me more things, and any retailer knows that the more you are top of mind, the more likely the consumer is to buy from you. So I may be just checking the weather with Alexa or playing some music, but I'm interfacing with an Amazon product, which sometimes throws a little ad or something in there, to my chagrin sometimes there, but that's helping them be top of funnel, top of the mind, and sell more things. Google is an advertising company, right? So let's face it, they want to be in there, but they want to collect some data to really, in the end, advertise to you better and understand what you're doing better. And so both of them had really strong incentive to get into the home, as you said. I agree with you. I think it was the novelty of it. I also think it's really easy. I'm a technologist. I live in Silicon Valley, around Silicon Valley. It's really easy to think, oh, well, everybody understands technology super well. And it's just simply not true, right? I can see it in my in-laws, right, are always struggling in that, and with how do I do this, how do that, and all of a sudden you had this device, and it was so simple, and it was technology, and I didn't have to learn how to communicate with the device. In theory, at least, this doesn't always work perfectly. I could just talk to that device naturally and have something happen. So that's really removes a bunch of the friction from the technology side. And I think a lot of people saw that and said, wow, this is really cool. I don't have to learn how to do all these things to make something happen. I just ask it, just like I'd ask another person to do something, and something happens. And I think that was a huge amount of the initial appeal was the simplicity and a lack of needing to understand the technology.
Did either of you guys watch the Knight Rider show?
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah.
David Hasselhoff, Michael Knight, it was Kit, right?
Yeah.
The Knight Industries 2000. So it seems like we're getting closer, right?
Yeah.
But any thoughts on the current state of the automobile industry and kind of their integration?
It's such the obvious place for a voice interface, the very best place, right? Your hands are busy. You need eyes on the road, safety there. And I don't know post-pandemic, but there is some, I believe it's is it 1 trillion hours? I hope I'm not an order of magnitude off, that in the US people spent commuting, right? Now it's probably a little less now, but that's a lot of hours, right? People are behind behind the wheel, right? And that's just the US. And if you globally, it's, N times more than that. And so what do we typically do in the car, right? It's kind of passive. I listen to music. I'm a big fan of listening to podcasts there. But voice they're fabulous for controlling listening to music or listening to podcasts there. I have the little Spotify car thingy in my thing. So I can say, hey, Spotify, right? And talk to Spotify and it does what I want it to do when I'm on the road. But I think it lets you think about, hey, not only can I do these passive things and passively, but I can play games. There's a company, Drive Time FM, that's all about, these are apps, but they're voice apps that you can play games in the car and have some fun there. And so or maybe I can even do some business, right? And get some probably simple things because it's a voice interface, which has things that you can and can't do. But it's such an obvious place to me where a voice interface is the very best way of interfacing with your technology. And so despite everything that's been done in the car, I think 10 years from now, we're going to be like, boy, we were living in the Stone Ages back then versus what we could do in the car with voice.
Definitely.
We'll see people driving old cars by themselves and be like, oh, look at that cowboy over there. Like, look what he's doing.
Like the Flintstones, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's shift and talk a little bit more about the future. Kane, you talked about some of the advancements of voice AI. Tell us more about some of the sophistication things that are trending that'll make it even better.
To be honest, the technology itself is pretty good. It's the reason why Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, Bixby, it's the reason why those things even exist today is because the technology is actually pretty good. There's companies out there like Yobi who can pull out a voice from a noisy environment, like on a train or something like that, and you can process and understand what that says. There's technologies out there that can detect your emotions. Sentiment analysis has existed for quite a long time. Voice biometrics has existed for quite a long time. Speech recognition has existed for quite a long time. It's just that what's happened is in the last 10 years is that the accuracy level of these technologies has got to a point where they're actually ready for production. And so most of the things that are hindering that future that you mentioned, which is that everything is voice enabled and we don't have to look at screens anymore. Part of what's hindering that is just simply the adoption from the businesses and also from, customers can't adopt it unless businesses are using it in some way, shape or form. Like I've got loads of smart speakers, but the use cases that I just mentioned, which is read my latest Pocket articles that I've saved to Pocket, I can't do that because Pocket hasn't built the skills in those places for me to do that. And I can't go into my bank's app and just ask it to transfer me $5,000 from a savings account because that capability doesn't exist in my bank's app. So it's not even a technology problem, I don't think. It's more a case of businesses adopting these technologies in the right places, building customer confidence and iteratively rolling it out. There is definitely, though, things that need to be improved on the technology. Things like accents have traditionally been a problem, although they're getting better. Things like, if you get into the minutiae of it, there's studies from 2020 and 2019, which is that, certain speech recognition systems recognize white American males better than they do black American females, for argument's sake. So there's definitely some kind of adjustments that need to be happening as far as accessibility and equality is concerned. But mostly, I think it's a case of actually just using the technology and putting it to good use. And I don't actually think that vision you were talking about, which is that everything's voice enabled and screens disappear, I don't actually think that is where we're heading, because voice is good for certain things, very good as a fast input, very good for data capture, very good for those things you were talking about there, which is emotional recognition and all that kind of stuff. But it can be bad for some use cases. There's a lot of businesses now that are actually using omni-channel experiences where you might call the call center and begin talking about something there, but then they might send you a text and you might need to send them a picture or send them a video of yourself so they can ID you or whatever it might be. And so I actually think we're moving to a world where voice, although it was kind of like on its own channel and built to be the future, which I do think it still is, also voice, I think, is going to infiltrate all of our existing digital channels to the point where it's another modality in those channels as well.
It's a principal modality, but it's not a single modality, essentially. Hey, I'm seeing this, but I'm also seeing this on the screen as a confirmation or to show me some options so that I select that next thing.
Exactly. It might default to voice only when your headphones, but then it might default to a multimodal on your mobile. But then actually what starts out as a voice only interaction or what starts out as a multimodal interaction might turn into the other, depending on the use case, and a voice conversation might turn to a text conversation might turn to a voice conversation. And I think the whole concept of devices and modalities, I think we're going to see fuse to the point where it becomes about the best option for that particular thing that you're trying to get done based on where you are and what devices you got access to.
Sure. So we might get rid of some screens in the process because it's just become more natural, but we also might just be pairing and integrating more to make it natural too, right?
Exactly.
If we jump ahead 10 to 20 years, any thoughts on what that could look like?
Over the long term, things tend to happen a bit quicker than you might think, but in the short term, it feels as though progress is quite slow. So if you think about where we were 5 years ago, 2018 or so, Amazon Alexa and the smart speaker kind of movement was kind of just getting started, really. There wasn't that many skills in the skill store. There wasn't that many devices in people's homes. And so, in 5 years' time, like now, as in now, from 5 years ago, the devices are everywhere. It's a household name. Everybody knows what it is, and it's become established, essentially. The stuff around everything being voice-enabled was really hyped up in 2019. You look at CES, and there's voice-enabled toilets, and there's voice-enabled this and voice-enabled that. And I think where we've settled to, and I think COVID has played a big part in getting us to this point, which is that all the frivolities and all of the kind of like superfluous stuff, which was just put voice anywhere it can go, because it can go anywhere. You just need a chip and a mic and an internet connection. It's really become about put voice where it deserves to be and where it should be. And so I think the next 5 years are going to be figuring that out. There may be coffee machines that actually don't have voice control within them. There may be toilets that certainly don't. Because how lazy do you have
listening.
to be?
The toilets are not listening.
Yeah. You've still got some degree of privacy. And so I actually think the next 5 years is going to be more about not voice being everywhere, but voice being in the places where it does its job best. And I think that's what I would encourage anyone who's considering exploring voice technology to do, is to not get carried away with the hype and some of this stuff that we're talking about, but be focused on where can it be applied to make sense for your business and sense for your customers. But in 10 years' time, I hope certainly that we've broken through that and we are at a point where, as I mentioned, the Pockets of the world, the Evernotes of the world, the services that you use on a daily basis are accessible from any device and any modality fundamentally. And so if I want to take a note on my watch, or if I want to, as we've been talking about this use case about reading articles to me, or if I want to check my bank balance, or if I want to, move an appointment or set an appointment or join a Zoom meeting or whatever it is that I need to do, wherever I am and whatever device I've got with me or on me, I should really be able to do it from that. And increasingly so, voice is going to be a big part of the interface modality in those environments. Because I don't know if your listeners have used like a smartwatch or something like that, but Tapping on a smartwatch is a nightmare. It just is. It's terrible. Typing on a phone to send a text message is a nightmare. Working your way through apps to get to the right place and tapping and swiping is just so long that those are the things that are going to start to disappear slowly but surely. Even on a computer, I dictate all my emails now. I dictate all the notes that I write. I'm using my voice for almost everything. And so maybe I'm a bit of an anomaly in that respect, but I don't think I will be in 10 years' time. I think that we're going to be using our voice more to get things done. However, I don't think we're going to be at the point where we've got ambient computing everywhere. It's going to be doing absolutely everything for us, and it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. I think we're probably a little bit further away from that. But Roger, I'd love to get your thoughts on where you think it's heading.
Yeah, well, first of all, I very much agree with your vision, Kane, and what you're talking about. Yeah, I love the fact you're talking about get back to the basics and what works over the next 5 years. Because I think we as an industry got our vision way ahead of where people actually wanted to use a voice assistant. And I think there's been a little retrenchment in a really good way around saying, okay, and think in a multimodal way. What is the best way? Should this have a voice interface? So I'll share, there's a little saying an old boss of mine who's a legend and of Adam Shire had, and he's like, if it's on screen, then maybe the UI is the best place to deal with it. If it's not on screen, then consider a voice interface. Now, I don't think that's 100% true, but I think that's those kind of paradigms and thinking about, okay, if I can't see it, maybe I should voice enable it. But if it's already there and it's right in the screen in front of me, maybe I voice enable it, but it may be just as easier and more efficient to go click on it. And I think that the art and science of that multimodal design will advance over the next 5 years. So I very much agree with you, Kane, it's kind of perfecting that, really understanding where this modality makes the most sense for what we're trying to do and makes it easier. Because we all want to get things done, right? I pick up a device, I want to get something done. What's the fastest, quickest, easiest way to get it done? And that may often be talking to it, tapping it, etc., a combination there. Yeah, in 10 years, I'll say maybe this is beyond 10, but what I'd really like voice to be is, imagine if you have a human assistant. You can go ask them to do things. Travels are my favorite. Oh, I need to fly to New York next week. They would know, oh, well, you know what? Roger flies United a lot. He has miles there. I'll book it on United. Here's the hotel he likes to stay at. Boom, boom, boom. They take care of all these things for you. Yep, it's done. It's booked. You're leaving next Tuesday at 3 p.m. out of San Francisco. All right, I'd like to see voice get to that level where I ask something in general and it understands enough of my what my desires are, what my preferences are, that it goes and really completes a fairly complicated task for me and then returns. Frankly, that's not so much about voice. It's a lot more about the AI behind the voice and what happens there, and really having, I call it putting the smart, the assistant, make it a capital A assistant, where it actually gets things done. Because right now, what we mostly do is we bark commands. And that's fine. We're at the bark commands stage of the tech. But actually, instead of asking it to do something and then have an agent go off and go do all these things, and then return with voice being the primary interface, is where I'd like to see things in 10-ish years. We'll see.
It works on the business side as well. I mean, if you imagine calling calling a retailer to make a complaint, or you want to return an item or something like that, and you call up, the retailer should know the phone number because it's probably on your account. They should know what you've just purchased last because they know what you've purchased and when it was delivered. So they should be able to preempt what it is that you're calling about. Okay, so we know that someone's bought something 2 days ago. We know it was delivered. There's either an issue or they've got a question about it. And so what the assistant should do over the phone or in the chat interface there is come out with that and say, are you calling about the such and such that you just bought 2 days ago? Yes, I am. Okay, well, what's wrong with it? And all of a sudden now you're having a contextual conversation, personalized to that customer and their need. And it's easier to do that on the business side in theory because you've got control over that data. what we're talking about here on the assistant side, on the Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, Apple Siri side kind of thing, becomes a lot harder because that data exists in lots of different places, lots of different private organizations that have it, and it becomes a real challenge to do.
In addition to the conversation we had with our guest on today's episode, we asked another expert to provide their insights on the future.
Hi, I'm Kim Aspeling, and I'm the Director of Creative Production at A Million Ads. And what we do at A Million Ads is essentially we create data-driven audio ads. So they run across all digital audio platforms. So if you're listening to podcasts or you're listening to music via digital radio, what does AI voice look like 10 to 20 years from now? Well, put simply, I really think it will be an integral part of our daily lives. It's going to be almost impossible to distinguish the difference between human and AI. Now, something that we do really need to be wary of and considerate of is we really need to create trust and protect privacy in this new voice AI world. And it's going to become really, really important for advertisers who already, struggle to gain trust. So fortunately, most ad tech companies are already doing this in the right way. But as always, it only takes one bad apple. So I think we're going to see a lot more regulations in place to keep up with the pace of ever-growing AI.
Any thoughts on sort of, this notion of, we mentioned preventative, and that got me thinking about like the healthcare space and health in general. Thoughts about how this will play into that in the future?
Yeah. Well, there's some pretty amazing technology that can actually listen to your voice and start detecting there's something is there's an anomaly, right? I'm speaking slower or something a little different than I did yesterday. Better go see your doctor. Or even starting to detect some things. I think somebody was playing with COVID actually, and listening to your voice and there's some telltale sounds about how voices change and whether you had COVID. And I've heard that with several other ailments there where it could be detected. I think that's really powerful. You're absolutely right. The notes right in there, right? Because especially now, because of the insurance industry requirements, doctors have to document. They spend all their time typing things in and doing that. And there's some really cool tech around that to say voice enable this. So doctors can focus on what doctors should be focusing on, which is, caring for the patient. The other thing that's really interesting is, medication adherence. So you go in, you have an issue, doctor stitches you up or takes care of you, and then you got to take one of these for the next 10 days. Well, that the adherence is really, really low. And what happens then? That person comes back a couple months later because whatever the underlying issue is wasn't resolved with that medicine. And so this idea of using a voice assistant for adherence to kind of remind people, or, almost be a nag, so to speak, or just be something where did I take, older people, right? As you start losing a little bit of your memory. And so did I take my pills or recording it?
Did you take your medication?
Yeah. Exactly. It's funny. My when I got into voice and I talked to my doctor, this is what he wanted to do. He was like, oh, I really want something that tells people to take their medicine, right? Or reminds them or helps them record that they did that. Because he's like, that's one of my biggest problems is people, if they took their medication, they'd be okay, but they forget, they get busy, they throw it in the kitchen cabinet after using it a couple times. And then unfortunately, they're back in a couple months with an ailment that could have been resolved. So I'm super bullish on voice in healthcare.
Yeah, there's lots of different areas as we've kind of got into. I think there's definitely some on the operational side. There's a reason why Microsoft acquired Nuance for $20 billion, because Nuance are knee-deep in operational integrations within all of the major healthcare systems in the US. So it's definitely making doctors' lives easier. There's been some research into how to make surgeons' lives easier as well. If you think about your operating table, you've got your hands hopefully full doing something productive. You can't really do much else while you've been sanitized and all that kind of stuff. So there's some interesting use cases there. Also on the customer side as well, I don't know know if your listeners are interested in checking out something called Warbot, which is a mental health chatbot that essentially you can have more or less a free-flowing, fairly open conversation with, and it will help guide you and help you with your mental health. You know, it help you deal with stress, anxiety, and a whole bunch of other things. And so, talking about saving lives, there's instances where, you know, maybe an early intervention from something like Warbot potentially can save lives. There's been some interesting use cases in India where a chatbot was created on Facebook Messenger to help women that are suffering with domestic abuse, and they found that the usage of that peaked at 2 a.m. in the morning, and they specifically chose chat, not voice, because they don't want to be talking to something in a house with an abusive husband, and that helped a whole bunch of women get help and stuff like that. And so there's all kinds of different use cases internally in the operational side, externally on the kind of consumer side, and also in that bit in between where you, as Roger was saying, you know, getting your medication reminders, appointment scheduling and booking, all of those kind of things where the customer and the entity need to do something together. I think there's some big opportunities for it there as well.
It's interesting. There's a, and I think it was USAA Insurance who released a bot, and they thought, you know, it's going to answer simple insurance questions for people. And then they realized people are actually asking, like, getting a little personal with it. And because, think about it, you don't talk to your insurance company unless something usually bad is happening, right? And so what they realized is they thought, you know, there is sometimes, you were talking about mental health there, Kane, and people feeling, there's been some stuff, they saw that, is that people are getting more personal than sometimes they do. The people that they talk to on the phone there is some people may be more comfortable talking to a bot, right, which isn't judging them, or they're thinking it may judge them, than actually talking to a person. So I think the mental health issue is really interesting, or just a sympathetic ear, which was what a lot of my understanding that USAA bot issue was needed. They made it a lot more sympathetic. Right, it was very businesslike, and they needed to make it a lot more sympathetic because people were literally complaining, and this horrible thing happened. I got in a car accident. What do I do? You can think of how that's an emotionally charged thing, and then you got to deal with, oh, my insurance company, right? So, sympathy there was important. So I think it's interesting to see the human behavior when you're communicating with a bot, and how that may vary. From what how they would communicate with a person, someone in person. Bright, open area of study and probably opportunity to do some pretty amazing things.
Anything that we can do to make those day-to-day tasks even easier in that hands-free environment, thinking about, you know, a busy young family, someone cooking, being able to do things at the same time and really multitask is going to be super significant. Thinking about advertising and obviously what we do at A Million Ads, we already work with actionable audio companies like Say It Now. And what we essentially do is we work with them to create dynamic ads for brands like Barocca, where customers could buy the product simply by using a voice command. So it's really instant, and we've seen some amazing results off the back of it. But how do we actually take it one step further and utilizing that free-flowing conversation I mentioned earlier, be able to interact with AI in a way that isn't just like a buy now message, but a useful and enjoyable experience, all personalized to us, something that we're actually in control of.
Any thoughts on the future of voice kind of connected to robotics? I mean, I'd like to say, Alexa, do the dishes and take out the trash and do the laundry and order me my favorite pizza, you know, like all in one breath. But do you guys have any thoughts for the future there? And you know, we're obviously spending time there, but I'm interested in your perspectives as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know where I stand on the whole home robot thing. Again, we were talking about references to old programs, so we talked about Knight Rider. I'm sure there's a few people who've seen the Jetsons in the past, and whether we're heading to that level of robotics in the home. I know Amazon have launched Astro and stuff like that, which is the kind of first edition of an in-home robot, and there's a couple of voice-enabled Hoovers and stuff like that. I don't know. I honestly don't know where that stuff will head, to be honest, fundamentally, because there's only a handful of things I can imagine it doing, and I wouldn't really want it following me around the house. Having said that, if you'd have told me 20 years ago I'd have been talking to a hockey puck in the side of my living room, then I might have thought you were a bit mad then as well. But certainly, what do robots do is the exact same answer to that question as when you ask what does an assistant do, what does a digital assistant do, which is it does grunt work that people don't like doing or they get tired of doing. You know, a bot never has a day off, it never has a sick day, doesn't want to put annual leave in, never has to leave early to go and pick the kids up. So it does stuff repetitively, consistently over time. And so I think that we're going to see definitely a proliferation of robots in the enterprise and robots in areas in public and whatnot where that kind of grunt work is needed. How is a voice interface going to help or hinder? I think people, if you look at Sophia, one of the famous kind of like humanoid robots, if you like, you see a robot like that, and immediately you just assume that you can talk to it. It's the same thing when you see a digital avatar on screen or in an app, or if you want to get into the kind of metaverse conversation, digital avatars inherently must be able to be spoken to because that's exactly what their embodiment of a human being. And so if you ever have a robot in the world, wherever it is, whether it's on a factory stacking boxes or whether it's in a house stacking the dishwasher, if it's got a face, if it looks like a human, it needs to have a conversational interface because there's just an expectation there. I also think there's room beyond that when it comes to the practical side of it. Like it would be ideal to be able to ask your washing machine what's wrong with it, be able to ask the robot if it's got a problem, how to debug it, how to fix it. All of that kind of stuff that you need to Google and watch YouTube videos and figure out how to do stuff should be solved by not just the voice interface, but having the capability to serve those needs as part of the software. But yeah, I think that in closing, anything that looks like a human, you should be able to speak to, and voice is naturally the only real modality of doing that.
Yeah, I think it'll be, I don't know. I share Kane's a little bit of skepticism of where robots are going to be. The Jetsons robot that does everything in the home, I think we're going to get, I don't know if we're going to get there. I think a little simpler. Your guys' example is great. And I mean, just yesterday, I was trying to figure out something with my microwave, right? It was a weird setting. And, they have 27 buttons and it's like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing so needs a voice interface, right? For me, just ask what it is. Or why isn't the manual in some voice accessible way kind of embedded in there so I can ask it, oh, what your example, what's the error code there? So I think we'll start seeing smarts in our machines that are in our home that start approaching, they work better. A Jetsons robot, well, when it can do the laundry and do the dishes, all for it. But I'm afraid we're going to go through more kind of gimmicky things on our path there. And that's okay. I mean, you start playing. Sometimes the best place with technology is do gimmicks and play with it. And that's the foundation upon what you build something that's truly useful. So it's okay to be gimmicky.
There is a really good use case actually in the UK. They probably have similar in the US. It's being trialed at the moment, which is a robot that will drop shopping off at your door. So it will go to a local shop. It's only a little thing. It's just like a little car. It's got a lid on it, and you put the shopping in. You'll order it online. The people in the shop put the shopping in. They put your address in, and the bot will go on the pavement really slowly, and it will navigate to your address. I can see the use for a voice interface there. Maybe if you're a really loyal customer, it might use your voice biometrics to open the lid and authenticate that you can actually access the shopping. Maybe though, actually, it will have capabilities that you might want to ask of the shop. Or did you not have? Or it can actually be proactive. Or we didn't have any milk, sorry, or you can ask what time do you close tonight, or you can ask whatever it is about the ingredients or what have you. So I can see some capabilities there where you've got, again, bots doing very specific, repetitive, tedious jobs, but as an enhanced kind of capability, maybe there's some voice interaction that could be useful there.
I've always said the opportunities for voice are kind of the barbells. So with young kids, right? Because they don't have all these pre-built conceptions about how it's going to work, and they're very patient. And then older people, because they didn't grow up with technology, and it's still very intimidating to them. And so the very friendly voice interface, non-technical way of interacting with their technology is fabulous for them. So I see that, it's those barbells. That's where the greatest opportunity is the youngest and the oldest can really benefit and really probably be the people who maybe use voice in ways that the rest of us aren't yet.
I'm also really looking forward to seeing how, we regulate this side of AI. For me, as I said, trust and connection is super, super important, especially within advertising. And there's a certain amount of trust that needs to exist between brands and consumers to connect, especially when we're talking about a channel as personal and intimate as audio. Thinking about when you listen to podcasts and you really trust the host that you're listening to. So, with celebrity voices, for example, a logical idea would be that, yes, well-known voices could license their likeness to be used as an AI. But one of the reasons brands like to use a celebrity is because it carries that level of familiarity and trust. I choose to listen to that podcast host because I trust them. And so if they're, recommending something to me, I want to do it because I believe in them. So if we're using a celebrity voice AI to try and convey trust without the celebrity's direct involvement, we need to ask, are we actually crossing an ethical line here? There's a really great passage in this book called Invisible Woman by Caroline Criado Perez. And the short of it is that after the Enron court documents were leaked, all the internal company emails became public, right? Making it the largest database of genuine human-to-human interactions. So you think, okay, that's perfect for training voice AI programs. Unfortunately, though, Enron gender makeup had a heavy male bias, and so smart speakers actually carry that same bias. Similarly, speech scientists have a lot of white male speech data taken from their databases of things like TED Talks, which, again, skew towards that bias, unfortunately. So if you're a woman and you'd like to test this yourself, next time your smart speaker is not actually picking up your voice, try and speak in a lower, deeper voice, and they'll be able to probably pick you up a lot better.
As we think about where VR is going with not just analyzing your voice and having conversational UI built into it, but also your eye movements and your emotions and some of your body language. Any thoughts on how this will play into kind of the metaverse?
Well, in the metaverse, you don't have a keyboard. If you're wearing a headset and all you have is your eyes, fundamentally, it might be able to recognize in time where your hands are in that, without holding on to some controls, and you'll be able to recognize where your elbows and knees are and stuff like that. But we're not kind of there yet. So in the absence of that, the navigation really seems to me the perfect way of navigating the operating system within the metaverse is a voice user interface. But then also, even within there, there's definitely going to be digital beings that are not actually real, digital avatars, virtual humans, and interacting with them is going to be through a conversational AI. So I think there's definitely a whole load of opportunities for this technology in that kind of space. I'm not, again, I tend to be a bit cynical with certain things like in-home robotics in the metaverse. I think it's early days. The metaverse, I think, might actually skip a generation. I don't think my dad's not going to be wearing his VR headset and going to the club and playing cards. But I think that the operating system level needs some kind of navigation capability, and I think voice is perfect. And then within those environments, as more use cases and scenarios get built in them, I think we're going to see actually interaction with virtual beings being dominated by a voice interface as well.
Yeah, so I'm bullish on voice in the metaverse for all the reasons Kane talked about. I think that those virtual beings is something that people are starting to pay attention to, but maybe not enough. If you have a presence in the metaverse, that is up 24/7. So either you have people in there staffing it 24/7, or you start having virtual bots, right, that people can have conversations with, either to handle it when it's not staffed, or to just handle the overflow. And I think it's really interesting. There's a startup called InWorld. And what is his name? Ilya Gefendin, I think is the guy who found it. This is all about voice and bots in the metaverse. And that's the vision, is that you're going to need bots in the metaverse to make it work. And he's the guy who started up API.ai that became Google's dialogue flow. So pretty well established in the industry. And I think there's some interviews with him that are pretty interesting to understand this more. But yeah, voice is going to be a critical part of the metaverse. A side little thing that I think would be fun is I go into the metaverse and I get to, dress up my avatar however it looks like. Why can't I have something, a little tech that changes my voice or makes my voice customized the way I like it? I mean, that's not a great business use case, but part of the fun of the metaverse is changing who you are, right? And having your kind of, your alter ego. Well, a different voice could be part of an alter ego as well.
Around ethics, there's obviously been a lot of debate on the ethics of sort of AI and voice assistants that, listen to all. Any thoughts on that? That's kind of the first question. And the next question I'm going to ask is like, how do we continue to design for the future? Knowing that, we can play a role. People, thought leaders like yourselves can really play a role in helping us design the future. So
you're not going to stop the advancements in tech. This is not going to happen. So attempts to do that have failed throughout history, actually, right? To slow things down. So if that's going to be true and the technology is going to get better and better and better, then we need to work together to think about ethics and privacy and what does that mean, and what, part of the privacy, and I could go off on a whole tangent with privacy, is everybody likes to talk about privacy and it's a hot topic. And yet for the general consumer, they click through the EULA, they don't pay attention, the little thing that pops up in the web about the cookies. Who pays attention to that? I don't, right? And I know what they're asking me there. And so how do you protect privacy in a way that people can understand? Because I think the way that we handle privacy right now is these complicated legal agreements and pop-ups and things that don't make sense. So how is it that I can give Kane's company, right? I'm interfacing with him via his company via voice. I'm just making this up, right? I give you permission to store this information about me and that and do these things for me, but not for my permission to go here. I don't think we found a UX or a way to do this that isn't kind of techie and geeky and unusable there. So I think there's an opportunity, maybe voices involved there, AI, to allow the permissions, allow me to set permissions in a usable human way that is certainly very, very different than what happens today.
I don't even think that even in the conversational AI or voice AI space that the whole concept of ethics is really being grasped properly yet. I mean, everyone's rushing onto the hype and building chatbots and voice assistants and launching stuff and that, but they don't really think about what the reality of what they're doing is. What they're doing is they're capturing data from customers, speech data, textual data, that data is being processed in whatever cloud it is you're using, Amazon, Google, whatever. That text is being stored, and monitored and kept for who knows how long. Nobody hardly that builds voice assistants today has any GDPR policies in place. I don't know what it's like in the US, but in the UK, you can only store certain data if you absolutely have to. You have to have a reason for it and a policy for it. You can only store it for so long. It has to be deleted automatically after 2 years, even if you are storing it for a certain reason. There's a whole range of things that you need to do when it comes to gathering data from people. And I don't think anyone's really considering it. One of the things that we do regularly is to consider that ethical side of things, because also, depending on the use case that you're using, certainly from a business, if you've got a voice assistant that's there to process passports for somebody, that assistant now has autonomy and it has authority. It can say, no, you can't have a passport. And all of a sudden, when there's this bot, this kind of virtual entity, you've got no recourse. You can't argue with it. You can't kind of do anything other than just accept what the machine tells you. And so we're going to hit a real ethical kind of minefield when these assistants start doing things that are, things like that are more important, that have an impact on people's lives. Trying to get a parking permit, the bot says no. What do you do about that? And if you're trying to cancel insurance, the bot says no. You're paying for your insurance constantly. And there's a whole range of things where, we have to question whether it's ethical to allow an AI assistant to do some of these things, because what's the impact of that on people,
Amen is all I have to say to that those last comments there, Kane.
Nice. You guys chose to kind of specialize in this area, and obviously it's you. I see you both as thought leaders in this space. For others that might want to get involved, any thoughts on any career advice that you would share?
Well, Roger alluded to the shortage of talent in this whole industry. It requires very specific skills around conversation design, around machine learning, around data science, and a whole bunch of things, computational linguistics, and a whole range of skill sets that are needed. And it doesn't. You don't need to have a human-computer interaction degree to be able to do some of this stuff. There's a lot of conversation designers that were playwrights or that were content designers and things like that. And so, and a lot of developers, for example, that build websites for a living with no JavaScript, and so they can build a lot of these solutions themselves. And what I would say is, if anyone's interested in exploring this as a career path, I can only offer the advice that I did myself, which is I read everything I could get my hands on about this stuff. I bought every single book that exists on how to design and develop these systems. I've read every single one of them. I've got notifications set up on my email, so anytime Google publishes or Google ranks an article that matches any of these phrases, voice AI, voice assistants, conversational AI, it pings my inbox. I meet people regularly like Roger and others. And I think networking is important because you'll unlock opportunities, you'll learn from people's experience, and just read everything you possibly can get your hands on. You'll find yourself within 12 months, you'll know what you're talking about and you'll know your stuff. And then thirdly is roll your sleeves up and get on with it. If you're interested in design, go and set up a voice flow account and design some stuff. If you're interested in development and machine learning and figuring things out, then go and get access to a Cognigy platform or DeepGram's APIs for speech recognition. Just roll your sleeves up and have a play around, because that's how you're going to really learn how this stuff works. And ultimately, in time, you'll develop the skills, you'll develop a bit of experience, and a career will be sitting in front of you.
Here. I'd say listen to Kane's podcast.
Nice. I would say that as well. Thank you, Roger.
Yeah, well, I will do the self-promotion for you and things. No, I mean, so he said read, but also listen. There's some great podcasts out there. And Kane's as one of the very best ones. And we're on a podcast as well. So listen to this podcast. I completely agree. I bang my fist on the table talking about conversational designers because I think it's such an opportunity. And it is not, and it is, you're right. If you have done playwriting or you're an English major or you've done that, you have an advantage. This is all about understanding how people communicate and how they talk, and then going, okay, now I need to, design something for a machine or really understand that. That is not technology skills. This is all about really a combination of, English and psychology and those kind of skills, those more social sciences and humanities skills. And I think there's a grand opportunity for that, for people to jump in, and we need more conversational designers. And then I just go play, right? If you're a developer, you absolutely can go and build for Alexa or Bixby or Google and go play, and they have development. But if you're not, right, there's tools like, like VoiceFlow. They're really gooey, drag and drop, go play. It is really, I think a lot of people, when they try, they're like, oh, this will be easy. And I will tell you, the more, when you build a voice app and you start thinking about it, it gets harder and harder because you realize human communication is rich. There's lots of different ways to communicate. And so it gets you to think about that. But yeah, go play with one of these tools. You can do the deep, geeky developer code in Node.js, or you can use these drag and drop tools, but just a great way to understand and think about how a voice interface will work.
So Kane, tell us more about your podcast as well for our listeners.
Cool. Yeah. So it's called VUX World. VUX World. It's on all the podcast players. VUX.world is the website. You can find it there as well. We, very similar to this, really, we find industry thought leaders, practitioners, business leaders who have utilized conversational AI and natural language processing technologies for the benefit of their customer experience, their business processes, and their customers. And we pick their brains about how they do what they do, so that the people tuning in can do what they do better, which is build and deploy better conversational assistants, higher quality conversational AI, and all that kind of stuff. We've had Roger on in the past. We've had people from Samsung, Google, Microsoft. We've had big businesses like Comcast, Mercedes, the whole kind of 9 yards. And so if you're interested in how conversational AI can be used to improve customer experience and improve business processes, then definitely check out VUX World. Cheers.
Thank you for all the insights and wisdom as serious, evangelists and leaders in the voice AI space, and loved hearing your thoughts, and just great to have you on the show. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to see you again, Roger.
Appreciate it all.
The Future of Podcasts is brought to you by Fresh Consulting. To find out more about how we pair design and technology together to shape the future, visit us at freshconsulting.com. Make sure to search for The Future of in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. And on behalf of our team here at Fresh, thank you for listening.